Hello everyone, and welcome back to Untold Pain Stories, the channel where you improve your English through emotional, dramatic, historical, and unforgettable stories. Today we are going to travel more than 2,000 years into the past and meet one of the most famous young leaders in human history. His name was Alexander. You may have heard the name Alexander the Great, but have you ever wondered how a young man from a small kingdom became one of the most powerful conquerors the ancient world had ever seen? His story is not only about battles and victories, it is also a story about ambition, friendship, courage, anger, dreams, and a man who wanted to reach the end of the known world. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the ancient kingdom of Macedon. His father was King Philip II, a powerful ruler who had transformed Macedon into a strong military kingdom. His mother was Olympias, a woman known for her strong personality and powerful influence over her son. From childhood, Alexander was not treated like an ordinary boy. He was prepared to become a king. He learned how to fight. He learned how to ride horses. He studied politics, history, literature, and philosophy. But one of the most important people in his education was a famous Greek philosopher named Aristotle. Aristotle taught Alexander about philosophy, science, medicine, literature, and the world around him. Alexander loved the stories of heroes. One hero especially fascinated him: Achilles, the legendary warrior from Homer's Iliad. Alexander wanted to become like Achilles. He wanted people to remember his name long after he was gone. There is a famous story about Alexander and his horse, Bucephalus. When Alexander was still a boy, his father was shown a powerful horse. The horse was wild and frightened, and nobody could control it. King Philip decided that the horse was impossible to tame. But Alexander noticed something that the others had missed. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. Alexander slowly turned the horse toward the sun, so its shadow disappeared behind it. Then he approached the horse calmly. The horse became quiet. Alexander climbed onto its back and rode it. His father was amazed. According to the famous story, Philip told his son that Macedon was too small for him, and that he should find a kingdom worthy of his ambition. Whether every detail of this story is true or not, it became part of Alexander's legend. And the legend was only beginning. When Alexander was about 20 years old, his father was assassinated. Suddenly, Alexander became king. He was young, but he was not weak. Some people believed that the young king would fail. Others believed Macedon could fall apart. Alexander moved quickly. He secured his position and defeated enemies who challenged his authority. Then he turned his attention to a much bigger goal. His father had planned a campaign against the Persian Empire. Alexander continued that plan. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia with his army. He was now facing the Persian Empire, one of the largest and richest empires in the ancient world. The Persian king was Darius III. Alexander's army was smaller, but it was highly organized and experienced. His soldiers trusted him. Alexander often fought near the front of his army, instead of staying far away from danger. This made his soldiers respect him. He was not a king who simply gave orders from a safe place. He was willing to face danger with them. Alexander won several important battles. At the Battle of Granicus, his forces defeated a Persian army. Then he moved through Asia Minor. City after city came under his control. But Alexander did not always destroy the places he conquered. In many areas, he tried to present himself as a liberator rather than simply a destroyer. Then came one of the most important battles of his life. At the Battle of Issus, Alexander faced Darius III himself. The Persian army was much larger, but Alexander used speed, organization, and careful tactics. Darius eventually fled from the battlefield. Alexander had defeated the Persian king, but he did not stop. He continued south toward Egypt. When Alexander arrived in Egypt, many Egyptians welcomed him as a ruler who could free them from Persian control. He was crowned as pharaoh. During his time in Egypt, Alexander founded a city that would become one of the most famous cities in the ancient world, Alexandria. The city later became a major center of learning, culture, and trade. But Alexander's ambition was growing. He wanted to defeat the Persian Empire completely. In 331 BC, Alexander faced Darius again at the Battle of Gaugamela. This battle would change history. Darius had a huge army. Alexander had fewer soldiers. But Alexander's tactics were brilliant. He created an opening in the Persian line and attacked at the right moment. Darius once again fled. This time, Alexander's victory was decisive. The Persian Empire was collapsing. Alexander entered Babylon, then Susa, and eventually Persepolis, one of the great royal cities of Persia. He had achieved what many people thought was impossible. A young Macedonian king had defeated the mighty Persian Empire. But Alexander wanted more, much more. He continued east. He crossed difficult mountains and entered Central Asia. His army faced harsh conditions, long marshes, and fierce resistance. Alexander himself was sometimes wounded, but he continued. His dreams seemed to have no limit. Eventually, he reached the Indian subcontinent. There he fought the Battle of the Hydaspes against King Porus. The battle was difficult. The Indian army used war elephants, something Alexander's soldiers were not used to seeing on such a large scale. Alexander eventually won, but something unusual happened after the battle. Instead of humiliating Porus, Alexander respected him. According to the famous account, Alexander asked Porus how he wished to be treated. Porus answered that he wanted to be treated like a king. Alexander respected his courage and allowed him to continue ruling his territory. This moment shows another side of Alexander. He could be ruthless in war, but he could also admire courage in an enemy. However, his soldiers were exhausted. They had been away from home for years. They had crossed mountains, deserts, rivers, and enormous distances. They had fought battle after battle. When Alexander wanted to continue farther into India, his soldiers finally refused. They wanted to go home. Alexander was angry. He wanted to continue toward the eastern edge of the world, but his army had reached its limit. Eventually, Alexander agreed to turn back. The journey home was terrible. His army suffered from heat, hunger, disease, and exhaustion. Many soldiers died during the difficult journey. Alexander finally returned to Babylon. He was still young. He had conquered an enormous territory, but his life was approaching its end. In Babylon, Alexander became seriously ill. His condition became worse over several days. His soldiers were worried. His friends gathered around him. The young king who had survived countless battles was now fighting a battle he could not win with the sword. In 323 BC, Alexander died in Babylon. He was only about 32 years old. His empire was enormous. His life had been incredibly short, and his death created a huge question. Who would rule his empire? Alexander did not leave behind a clear adult heir who could immediately control everything. His generals eventually divided his empire among themselves. The empire he had created did not remain united for long. But Alexander's name survived. His story traveled across continents. Kings studied his battles. Generals copied his tactics. Writers told stories about his courage. And ordinary people continued to wonder about the young man who had dreamed of conquering the world. Was Alexander truly great? That question is difficult. He was brilliant, brave, ambitious, and an extraordinary military leader. But he also caused enormous destruction. His campaigns brought war and death to many people. He could be generous, but he could also become extremely angry. He could respect his enemies, but he could also punish people severely. Alexander was not a simple hero. He was a complicated human being. Perhaps that is why his story has survived for more than 2,000 years. He was a young man who wanted to become unforgettable, and he succeeded. But there is something important we can learn from his story. Alexander conquered cities, kingdoms, and empires. Yet he could not conquer time. He could not stop death. He could not take his empire with him. In the end, even the most powerful king becomes a part of history. His greatest victory may not have been the land he conquered. It may have been the fact that people are still talking about him more than 2,000 years later. Alexander once dreamed of reaching the end of the world. He never truly found it, but his story reached places he could never have imagined. And now, after more than 2,000 years, you are listening to his story. That is the strange power of history. People disappear. Kingdoms disappear. Cities change. But stories can survive. And sometimes, one story can live longer than an entire empire. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you enjoyed this historical story and want to improve your English through simple, interesting, and unforgettable stories, make sure to subscribe to Untold Pain Stories. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep improving your English. I will see you in the next story.